Hi, welcome to the Three Times podcast. Today I'm talking to Yakka Doon, the folk persona of singer and songwriter Claire Welford. Claire lives on the edge of the North Pennines, a setting that influences her poetic writing and singing and complements her unique style. As Yakka Doon, she has released 2 albums of original compositions, plus an EP and a single, and she can often be found playing clubs and festivals in the Northeast. In June 2024, she appeared at one of Hexham Bandstand's sessions, and I was delighted that she agreed to chat to the podcast. Claire is also the bass player for The Last Path, a slowcore trio whose music might, at first hearing, sound completely different from her solo work. But as we find out, the 2 genres have some common roots. Claire Welford, thank you for talking to Three Times podcast. Can I ask, first of all, how you describe yourself as a musician?
Ooh, that's a really good question to start with. Well, thanks for coming to chat to us. And describing myself as a musician. I think, well, when we spoke last week after the gig, I was sort of saying that I feel in a similar way to you, like an amateur musician. That it's something that I, well, in part do for fun, do for a hobby. But there is also something, I guess, for me about processing things and writing music and playing music that feels a bit more important than just entertainment. So there is a level of, I guess, creativity and processing things and it feeling like a really valuable thing. So I would say I'm an amateur musician that uses music for other purposes, but also likes to be able to share that with people. Mm-hmm. I think there's some hesitation sometimes in why I perform or why I do things, and I quite often come back to the question of that I get a lot from other people playing music, and it feels really important to me about what other people give. And so I guess there's something about sharing that with people that's important for me as a musician.
Yeah. Now, I thought I had a handle on the kind of music that you do. I was listening to Rampton Optimism and Strenuous Details yesterday, and I thought, right, I understand what Claire Welford is about and what Yakka Doon is about. But then I discovered The Last Path.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I didn't know anything about The Last Path.
Yeah.
So could you talk to me about those 2 strands of your music making?
Yeah, so Yakka Doon is, I guess, a solo project currently. It has some, I guess part of the reason of not using my name, one of the reasons is that it opens it up to playing with other people and then being involved. So it's sort of a solo project but may involve other people and has in the past. And The Last Path is a trio which is kind of a different flavour to Yakka Doon in terms of it being on the more, I guess, rock indie side. With Phil Tyler, who is plays with Kath Tyler, who people might know, and Robin Fry. So he plays in some other bands, Emergency Librarian, a band called Lava Mouse, and I guess it's primarily driven by Phil and his writing. So it's a trio with drums, bass and guitar, and we do some harmony singing together. So it maybe sounds a bit different to some other rock music because I guess essentially Phil and I met through sacred harp singing, so shape note singing, and it's a really particular form of community singing. It is religious text, but not all of the people who sing it are religious. But it's really loud, so it's about singing full voice. So I think it sort of helps people, help me, I guess, be more comfortable with what my natural voice is and to use that in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I suppose in both strands of the music that you kind of hear what your natural voice sounds like and how you use that.
Yeah, you do have a very distinctive voice, don't you? I think it's in the Yakka Doon music, it certainly marks you out from a lot of other people who sing with a guitar accompaniment. There is quite a bit of overlap between the two, and it's not solely the sound of your voice. It's the style of singing and the harmonies. But parts of it sounded to me a bit like some of Fairport Convention stuff. Now, are you familiar with Fairport Convention's catalogue? Some of their interpretations of slow traditional tunes were quite like what The Last Path does.
I guess it's the thing of, in music, there are commonalities in all genres. And I think maybe because, well, actually Robin as well, but Phil and I do folk music in various different ways, sort of separately and together, that I think there's always an aspect that bleeds into what it is that you're doing. So I've been working on another band project with some other people called Burned House, which is, I would have categorised it more towards the metal side, rock and metal, but actually people hear in it also hear folk within that. So I think it sort of bleeds into all areas, whether I wanted to or not.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing.
No, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So how did your music evolve? Because obviously you've developed as a folk musician, but expressed yourself in other genres too. How did you evolve as a folk musician in the first place?
Oh, well, I started off more in rock, and I played with a couple of bands, more cover bands, in sort of late teens, and then I played with one band where I started writing, and it probably went for about a year. I was maybe just finishing college into university, and it ended, and then I didn't do anything for a long time. So I would continue to play in the house, but I didn't really do any writing up until about, I guess, 2017. So I've been singing Sacred Harp. Phil asked me to join The Last Path, to step in for someone who left the band, and because we sang together, wanted to do some harmony singing. And I think I was trying to write sort of poetry and other things, and we'd had a conversation about previous songwriting, and he had a perception of me that I was a songwriter. And so I think we started to kind of play around with trying to encourage each other to write. I think I'd started to use it a little bit, kind of like I was talking about at the beginning about processing things, that actually I was finding that it was really helpful to think about what was happening for me, what was happening in the world, and kind of how I was looking at that. And really started to enjoy trying to use words and music. So I think, I don't know, maybe 10 years when I wasn't doing any writing, I was still playing and sort of noodling around with music and sort of creating sound, but not songs. So I would always see, and up until I started singing Sacred Harp, I would always see myself as a guitarist, not a singer. And I think all of those things started to sort of change around the time that I started to write again, and that I was figuring out what my natural voice was and being more comfortable with that. Yeah. And also feeling a bit more happy with the words that I was writing and kind of how I was expressing things. So at first I was, I guess, a bit more focused on songwriting. But like everything, there are periods where you're producing a lot and doing really well, and then there are other times when actually everything feels really difficult. And so in those times I started to just try and make sure I was writing, so I'd write poetry or just try and write down some words. And I think that has helped sort of shift and change what the lyrics have been like, because actually I've become less, I think sometimes less restricted by maybe what a traditional form of a song should be, or how it should be, and allow it to be a bit more free form, more sort of within the poetry aspect than lyrics necessarily.
You know, there are various techniques to stimulate creativity. So you just kind of let it go, did you, and dealt with it as it came?
Yeah, and I think for some people that really works, the idea of having quite a routine and a restricted practice about doing it. But I would get really, if I did that, I would get negative on the days that I didn't write. So I guess I'm always cautious for myself about saying I need to give myself time to do, like tell myself that actually I can have that time to do it rather than, having to do other things in the house or do other work. But it not being like a rule and sort of be negative about it if I break it. So it is a balance of saying to myself, actually, maybe it's helpful to sit down and write right now, but it doesn't have to be every day of a certain length.
Yeah. And when you start, do you complete a song, or do you have a sort of backlog of drafts and bits of songs that need stitching together?
Yeah, a bit of all of those things. So there are some things that I've written that maybe are done in 20 minutes and it seems like, well, this is the way that songwriting should be. And then I'm still trying to finish, and I think there's various reasons I'm still trying to finish it, but there is still a song that I'm trying to finish now that I think I've been working on since about 2019.
Right.
And I don't really feel bad that it's still going, because there's something about it that feels important, that it's taken time to form, and maybe there's a reason that it's taken time.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there are things. Actually, there's one recently where I think I wrote a set of lyrics maybe 4 years ago, and it didn't have its music, and it was just sitting there. And there are things in the book because I use a few different books to write in.
Yeah.
There are things in the book that will probably never have music, and that's fine. And sometimes there are things that I'm like, oh, actually, this is...
You just understand
but this thing finds its way.
Do you write with a pen, or do you use a computer to do compositions?
Oh, no, I have to write with a pen. I mean, if I have a thought and it comes up and I'm somewhere else, then I will write it with other pens. But predominantly, most of the time, I carry at least one of the books and the set of pens with us. And if I'm out walking and I don't have them, I do use my mobile to write in the notes section.
Yeah.
But then I'll put it in the book when I get back. So
yeah.
It's
not very satisfying using notes, is it?
No.
It's handy, as you say, when you're out and about and you've got nothing else. But it's not a satisfying way to express yourself, I don't think.
No.
So when you're out and about with your phone or your book and pens, where do you draw your inspiration from? I have the impression from the way that your Bandcamp page is presented and the style of the artwork on your albums, that a lot of what you write about is County Durham and the moors and the fells and stuff.
Yeah.
That's not solely true, though, is it?
No, it's not. Maybe in the first one, a lot of it was... I think I get a lot of ideas when I'm out walking, and sometimes when I'm cycling as well. There's something about being out in the space, and sometimes it's with people, but mostly when I'm on my own, that kind of allows for that empty space in your mind, or noticing smaller things. Yeah, a lot of it probably is based around here or in the northeast generally, so I haven't done so much recently, but going walking in Northumberland and down in the Yorkshire Dales, those sorts of things. I guess the ones that are, I was going to say less about nature, but I suppose some of them are about nature, but about other themes. That there is a lot about politics and about social issues and people's experiences of living in the world. And I guess some of that is also influenced by the local area, but also looking kind of globally, and some of the things recently, especially with all the things that are happening in the world at the moment, are about conflict and politics and the human experience, and that is looking wider beyond this area.
Yeah. So to take a small step back, you started writing your own songs after a fallow period. What was it that led you to go out and perform? Because that's quite a big step and a different thing for a creative person from writing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I can blame Phil Tyler for that.
Right.
Because when I started writing again, I suppose I can blame myself for accepting. But I think I'd started sending him and some other people some demo recordings of the songs, and he was putting a gig on with a group called Alula Down, I think they're called, a duo, and now Claire, and he asked me whether I wanted to do support, and I crazily said yes despite all of my fears and concerns about it. And I think some of it was helpful to have a thing to focus on, to finish things and to be practicing them in a way that felt like they could be played.
Mm-hmm.
So I said yes, and that's kind of where the performing started, and then quickly spiraled out of control.
All right. What kind of happened? Did you just end up going to folk clubs and doing lots of gigs, or
no?
what?
Just I think because Phil and then also Nev, who was at the gig, and some of the people who were attending the gig are quite involved in the Newcastle music scene, that they then started asking about other gigs, and as happens, one thing leads to another, and people put you in touch with other people. And generally, if I get asked, I will play if I'm available on that date.
Yeah.
So
the opportunities presented themselves and you took them, essentially.
Yeah.
So do you think this revealed a previously unacknowledged yearning to perform?
Ooh, I'm not sure that it's about performing, even though it is a performance. I think, and it's something I've kind of wrestled with for a while, the idea of whether it's what performing means, why I'm doing it. And I sort of often come back around to the idea of it being sharing and being in an experience and presence with other people rather than performing. In the past, I've felt that it should be a performance, but that doesn't feel very genuine to me. And it feels in conflict with who I am and who I want to be. So I have been learning or working on the process of playing in a more genuine way and being genuine with people rather than it having to be a performance.
Yeah, that's interesting. You are the first person I've spoken to who said that they try to be themselves on a stage. Other people have said that it's not them, and that in fact that they could not do it if it was them. That they have to adopt a persona to present to other people.
I think I sort of wonder whether some of this for me is about some of my time in like working. So for more than a decade I worked in sales, and I felt like I had to almost play a role to be that person, because actually that job and doing sales is really in conflict with who I am as a person and kind of my values and who I see myself as. Once I changed that situation, I realised how much more comfortable I was not having to do that. And I think in all aspects of my life now, I would rather work to it not be a performance.
It certainly looks to me, from your career so far, that commercial success is not an objective.
No.
Do you have an overall purpose, or is it to be content doing what you're doing?
I don't think there is a purpose, and I think that's something I'm searching for at the moment. There is a question sometimes about why am I doing this? I don't think I have a question about why am I writing, but sometimes I do have a question about why am I performing, and why am I being playing to
when
these
it's freezing
people?
cold and you're in a band standing next to them and the audience is sitting there in the rain, that kind of thing.
Yeah, which is very kind of people to come out and enjoy or try and enjoy that experience. There's something about the process and change and striving for something and trying to head towards the musician, the writer, the creative person that I want to be, that feels like the important part of what I'm doing. But I guess also that there are things when I'm writing and playing that I'm considering and thinking about that are about me and about the world, and the world is in many ways changing and not at the same time, and it's a good place to sit and think about that, and to, I guess in terms of sharing it with people, it's a good way to give other people space and time to consider and think about those things and attach their own meaning to what they're hearing.
Your Yakka Doon songs, which are the ones that I've read the lyrics to, it is, as you said, poetry, and it's quite dense and complex, isn't it? Or rich would be another word. It's not something that you could look at and quickly discern the intent behind it. So I'm wondering if you're trying to say to people, consider this issue, consider how you feel about this issue, for example. Are you trying to be provocative and say to people, think about this is important, or are you being reflective and saying, this is what I feel, empathise?
So I think the latter, but without that end bit about demand and empathy from other people. I don't think being provocative is not part of my makeup as a person, I don't think. If it happens for other people, that's not my intention. And it's more about me reflecting on things and giving myself and other people the space to, or I guess inviting them to say, you know, I'm thinking about these things. If you would like to also think about them at the same time,
Right.
This is a space to maybe be able to do that. I guess in the span of someone's writing, I think we get this more with, I don't know, in academic work, there's an idea that people do research and write and they're making a statement or a claim, and sometimes we can really focus on what they've written in one particular period of time, and actually over the span of a lifetime, statements, ideas, considerations change over that time because where we're at, our experience, the information that we have changes over the course of that time.
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways they're always sort of a pondering and considering things rather than it necessarily always feeling like a definitive statement for me about where I'm at.
Mm-hmm. So does the poetry come first, or does it evolve at the same time as the music?
It can happen any which way. So I think originally when I was writing, the music used to come first and then the words would come later. And then there was a period of time, I think, where it switched around and it was lyrics first and I'd try and figure out music to it. And now it's sort of a combination. And as I was saying earlier about trying to be less restrictive with myself, there's something helpful for me about leaving it open to see just what happens rather than forcing it one way or the other. Now,
I've noticed on your table there you've got a very thick book called Folk Songs in England.
Yeah.
Are you a bit of a student of folk songs?
So someone gave me that book recently because they were clearing out.
All right.
That's why I've ended up with it on the table. Although there is an intention to read it. Yeah, I think through Sacred Harp I was kind of encouraged by some people to go to the sing-arounds, particularly the one at the Cumberland Arms in Byker. I mean, you can sing anything there, but it is swayed more towards traditional song. I wouldn't say that I'm well versed at all in any respect of folk songs, but I think there are lots of folk songs that do speak to me and I do enjoy learning them and sort of sharing that tradition. And also hearing other people and what they bring. It's a really nice space. I suppose I feel quite lucky that I live where I'm from and there is a tradition of folk song here and that it feels that people have held on to them and shared them. And that there's feels something important about that sense of community and folk song,
So what are your ambitions for the near future? One of your Yakka Doon albums is prominently labelled demo.
Yeah.
And has been for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
So what for example are the next steps with that album?
So there is a intention to properly record, and there are some songs that haven't made it to the demo online for various reasons. So I think, to be fair, I'm essentially finished writing album 3 as well.
Right.
So I'm a bit behind on recording, and I think there was a lull after COVID, so things were sort of picking up before 2020. I think had COVID not happened, there would have been momentum that I'm not sure I would have been able to stop, which might have been sort of a negative thing in terms of life and work. And so I think that sort of stopped the momentum of recording as well. And I was getting in a position towards the end of last year that I was going to start that process. And then I had an accident and cut off a bit of my finger, which stopped all playing for a little while. Yeah, unfortunately so. So just as I was getting to the point where I was starting to put things together to do the recording, that got paused again. So I'm sort of setting an intention for later on in the summer to actually sit down and get things done.
Yeah. It's quite an investment to record to anything that approaches like studio quality, isn't it? An investment in time and cash. As a performer, do you think that it's a worthwhile investment?
So I only recorded the first album because people kept asking at gigs for recordings and I was a bit resistant about the idea, and then I sort of reflected on my own, how important other people's recorded music is for me. And also how helpful it is to have a record of things. I have managed to record the first one mostly with a home setup, and then help from Robin, who plays the other band. He had some equipment that we managed to use, and I think probably the intention for the future ones will be similar. I think there's a internal hesitancy or conflict about the idea of doing the solo stuff in a recording studio for all sorts of various reasons. So I guess that in terms of the cost, it less affects that for me and in my thinking. And really the performing, if I get paid to perform, that money gets put to one side for the purposes of being able to put out the next music. Yeah. So I guess it just sort of, the intention of what I'm doing is that it just funds itself for the next bit of creation, whatever that is. And that seems to be working at the moment.
Yeah. Most of the performing musicians I speak to are somewhat disillusioned about recording their music because they see it as an expensive thing that they have to do, but for which they'll never recoup their costs. I've spoken to several people who've invested thousands of pounds in an album and know full well that they'll never get that money back. It's kind of, and they kind of feel that they have to do it, not that it's their sole purpose. So it's interesting to hear you say that it's that you want to record of what it is that you do. When you go to gigs, do people ask you for CDs and such like, or do they just say, are you on Spotify?
No, I think if people come to ask, generally they want to buy something or just have a chat, and I'm fine with that as well. I guess because I have a daytime job that I do and enjoy, so it's not a thing that feeds me, and like literally, so there's less of a pressure on me to need that from people. I do have things on the streaming sites and digital that if people want to listen, it's sort of a delicate balance for me of that. Essentially I would be happy to give the music for free in some way, but then I don't want to devalue other people's music when they're doing it as a job, and actually it's really important that they get paid and somehow manage to recoup the costs of things that they have to do to be able to live. But Phil has a long history in the Newcastle music scene, played in lots of bands, and whenever we put music out there is a conversation about, well, we're going to make this many CDs and hundreds of them will sit in a room in a box. You'll never sell everything that you make. So there does seem to be a resignation that there are some things that you have to do, but whether they're useful, meaningful, whether you really have to do them, I don't know.
I don't know.
It's a funny thing, because I think I've got a lot of music in the house that I listen to, but in the last few years I do buy things to support people, but I listen to them less in the house if it's someone that is local that I see live, because there's something really special about the live experience. And it's a bit of a difficult balance that I'd rather go and see someone live necessarily than listen to the recording.
What's upcoming in the world of The Last Path and Yakka Doon in the next year?
So The Last Path are also in a position where we have, I think, sufficient new material that we're going to be recording, and we're kind of trying to set some time to do that. And we've got, I think we're playing in Manchester, but otherwise it's, and probably Newcastle later on in the year, in November or something like that. So there's a few things later on in the year, but not an awful lot at the moment. And in terms of Yakka Doon, so I'm heading over to the Lakes in a couple of weeks to a festival called Hyper Inverted, which is it's almost like a bit of a Newcastle away day. There are people playing from other places, but and it's in a nice little woods where you sort of camp in the woods, and the festival's there, so it's a good place.
So is it hard to get gigs these days, do you think? Is it getting harder, getting easier?
I think I don't know the answer to that question, because generally I only play when I get asked to play.
Oh, right. It's compliments.
And it means that sometimes it's quite busy and then other times it's quite quiet, but that's kind of good because it means I've got a bit more time to play and write and practice, rather than it being endless stream of things to do.
Claire Welford, thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for listening to the 3 Times podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and tell your friends about it.